Ex-President Trump's complicated legal predicament in the Supreme Court case has major ramifications for his political aspirations, especially his possible 2024 presidential campaign. Prior to the Supreme Court, Donald Trump was aiming for a novel legal approach. He is, on the one hand, asking the court to rule on a defense linked to an obscure covert operation. According to this constitutional clause, ex-presidents are immune from federal prosecution. Before we get into the specifics, make sure you subscribe and enable notifications so you can get our daily breaking news updates. Much obliged. Meanwhile, Trump wants the court to put off making this decision as long as possible. The court appears to have quickly denied this request, suggesting that Trump may not run for president in 2024. With this move, Trump hopes to put a stop to the federal criminal investigation that began with his activities during the 2020 election. While that's happening, the matter is pending before the U.S. Supreme Court. Special counsel Jack Smith, the chief prosecutor in 2 federal criminal cases filed against Trump, has urged the Supreme Court to swiftly decide that Trump cannot claim immunity from charges linked to his alleged conspiracy to conduct election fraud. Although this may not be the final instance of Trump's criminal accusations reaching the highest court, it is the first of its kind. Yet another instance involving a participant in the invasion of the Capitol on January 6, 2021, is also now being considered by the court. Possible implications for Trump's charges stem from this case. None of the sitting presidents, including those expected to receive their party's presidential nomination again, have ever been indicted. The cases filed against Trump are raising new and previously unanswered legal questions, including several pertaining to the First Amendment. Trump may be able to avoid justice if the Supreme Court does not quickly resolve these outstanding issues. Delaying Trump's criminal trials until after the 2024 presidential election seems to be his goal. If elected, he would be able to temporarily block these prosecutions using his presidential power. As of right now, the appeal is putting Trump's criminal prosecution for election fraud on hold. In his recommendation to the Supreme Court, Special Counsel Smith asks them to decide whether President Trump can avoid punishment for crimes he committed while in office. Trump is also facing a distinct lawsuit over the retention of classified materials, which could proceed independently of the election fraud case. The subject is still open while these legal processes go on. Will the Supreme Court's rulings dash Trump's aspirations to run for president in 2024? Although the outcome of these cases is uncertain, they have the potential to significantly alter the trajectory of American politics in the years to come. Our investigation into the complicated legal situation of former President Trump has focused on the several issues he is involved in and the recent events at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court justices are currently debating 2 crucial legal issues regarding former President Trump. First, whether he has absolute immunity from federal prosecution for any crimes committed while in office, and second, whether he is immune from prosecution under the Double Jeopardy Clause, which was invoked during his impeachment proceedings related to his attempts to overturn the 2020 election. This case has brought up the appointment of Trump appointee Judge Aileen Cannon to the record, because people thought she was biased. Because of this, some have speculated that Special Counsel Jack Smith's best chance of convicting Trump could be in the election theft case. Trump is now facing criminal accusations in Georgia and New York State, on top of these federal prosecutions. Although this is only a preliminary ruling, the Supreme Court's decision to grant Smith's motion to proceed is unusually quick. The electoral fraud case might get a ruling from the court soon. Emphasize that the Supreme Court has not yet decided to consider the case. It is widely believed that the majority of the court will find Trump's legal arguments in the ongoing litigation to be lacking in strength. However, considering the regular tempo of the court, the fact that the Supreme Court is considering moving swiftly on this subject is noteworthy and unprecedented. Some worry that Trump will avoid prosecution altogether. Given that the justices on the High Public Interest Court appeared dubious about the government's claim that Cohen's return to prison was lawful, this case highlights the significance of prompt judicial involvement. A number of the judges cast doubt on the constitutionality of Cohen's house confinement terms, including the prohibitions against him speaking publicly or writing a book about his ordeal. Though it may have a direct bearing on Cohen's life, the case has wider ramifications for the separation of powers in the executive branch and the legitimacy of the judicial branch. John Michael Dougherty, Cohen's lawyer, reflects concerns about the possible misuse of executive authority in his arguments and during the subsequent court proceedings. The value of the First Amendment, particularly the right to free speech, is exemplified in this case, particularly in the context of retaliation against political opponents. His initial detention conditions, which infringed upon his First Amendment rights, highlight the necessity of protecting Cohen's rights. Basic liberties. As this case moves forward in court, its resolution might have far-reaching implications for the separation of powers, the role of the judiciary, and the safeguarding of individual liberties from partisan meddling. One wonders what would occur if government personnel were found to have improperly behaved in their attempts to censor free expression. The arguments, particularly Trump's lawyer Alana Harbaugh's, were quite brief, which could mean that the appeals court is giving Cohen's legal team a lot of weight. The challenging questions asked by the prosecutors from the Justice Department indicate that the court is seriously considering the claims of Cohen being unfairly sent back to prison as retaliation. The case's potential impact on people's rights will make it a hotly anticipated one as it progresses. The decision of the appeals court could have significant implications for the balance of power between the executive branch and the judicial system, as well as for the protection of constitutional rights in the United States. Under the current government control and the extent of presidential powers in influencing the justice system, Trump's legal team is faced with these complex legal waters. The judge's line of inquiry aimed to test the limits of the president's immunity, and how far a president's acts, even those motivated by personal grudges, can be deemed to be part of their official duties. Regarding the president's immunity from civil responsibility for acts done during the course of their official duties, the discussion of the Nixon versus Fitzgerald case was especially pertinent. Regarding Cohen, the meat of the matter is regarding to what extent were Trump's purported efforts to gag Cohen required of him as president? Alternatively, Trump's purported efforts to gag Cohen may have been motivated by inner drives. The judges rejected Harbaugh's argument, which argued that the complaint did not contain sufficient evidence to establish that Trump had orchestrated the retaliation. Would presidential immunity cover the claimed activities if established? They seem to be looking for a more direct answer to that question. It brings up the Trump Blazing Game case, which determined that he does not have total immunity. With regard to our civil litigation, I added a new component to the case. It was clear from the judge's explanation of the case's relevance and Harbaugh's lack of acquaintance with it that presidential immunity legal precedents are constantly changing. It seems that the judges have been mulling over the need to hold leaders responsible for their acts that may go beyond their official responsibilities and the principles of presidential immunity throughout the hearing. Trump allegedly resorted to using his presidential power for personal gain, according to Kirwan. Evaluate these concepts. Hubbard's use of absolute immunity and her emphasis on the absence of substantial evidence in Cohen's complaint demonstrated the defense's strategy of concentrating on procedural issues. But the judge's pointed inquiries showed that they wanted to get to the meat of the case, the substantive problems. At the end of the hearing, it was quite evident that their concerns had been valid. Would have far-reaching consequences for figuring out where the president's authority and immunity end. How the legal system strikes a balance between individual rights and the safeguards provided to the nation's top office is a central question this case raises. The decision in this case will most certainly change the way the law views presidential responsibility and behavior. Numerous legal issues involving former President Donald Trump are still unfolding. Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, has brought a lawsuit naming Trump, his business, and his 3 adult children. The lawsuit claims that Trump and his associates inflated property values and falsified financial documents. Trump has always refuted the claims made in this case, which state that they artificially inflated property prices to get better conditions from lenders and insurance. The trial is still continuing in Manhattan, despite Trump's claims that his financial statements were discounted. He is also subject to a gag order, which prevents him from publicly criticizing the court officials. The most recent effort to have this gag order reversed failed. Despite arguments from Trump's legal team, the court upheld its position, demonstrating the significance of a fair and impartial court system. The complexity of the issue is further complicated by Trump's reaction to this gag order, which includes his tantrums on his social platform. Despite all the obstacles and drama that have transpired in court, the trial's presiding judge, Judge Arthur Garin, has stated his intention to see the case through to its completion. Trump has a tense connection with the people investigating him, as shown by his outspoken criticism of Letitia James and his description of the probe as a witch hunt. An appeals court in Michigan recently upheld Trump, ensuring his inclusion on the Republican presidential primary ballot in the state will continue. His deeds on or around January 6, 2021, formed the basis of the challenge. Things are happening in Washington, D.C. Focusing on the procedural parts of the primary election instead of making a particular decision on whether Trump should be disqualified under the 14th Amendment, the court decided that the issue was not yet ripe. As he maintains his prominent position, Trump navigates a complicated legal terrain, as shown by the verdict of the Michigan Appeals Court and the current litigation in New York. To the political arena in the United States. There are larger legal questions about the president's behavior and accountability, and the results of these trials may affect his political career. While we wait, feel free to leave a comment with your opinions. Please give us a thumbs up if you thought this video was informative. Surprisingly, on December 14, 2023, the Trump Organization was thrown into a tornado of turmoil when notoriously impatient New York Justice Arthur Engoron delivered a summary judgment that seemed to dismantle the organization or, at the very least, to loosen the grip of power held by former President Donald Trump and his family. State Attorney General Letitia James started the trial that led to this decision, causing quite a stir and raising doubts about how much power Engoron actually had in this monumental case. The decision caused a ruckus and raised doubts about Mr. Trump's future. While investigating the fallout from this historic decision, the New York Empire revealed BIN protesters Jonah E. Abramowitz, Kate Christobeck, and William K. Rashbaum. But as they spoke with attorneys and looked at previous rulings, it became clear that the judge could have gone too far in trying to liquidate the corporations involved. Claims that Trump and his adult sons had manipulated the dimensions and value of their properties through a complicated web of deceit were at the heart of this civil fraud action, as well as an artful manipulation show. Allegedly, they created a well-planned operation to deceive with the purpose of influencing long-term outcomes and manipulating tax treatment. Nevertheless, questions have arisen about the judge's ability to impose such severe sanctions. Experts in the field of law have speculated that more legal actions may be required to dismantle or change the control of a company. The controversy surrounding the summary ruling has further complicated an already difficult court struggle. Trump firmly denies any wrongdoing and argues that property values and perceived anomalies are subjective, while maintaining that all loans have been repaid in full. A separate battle over a restraining order that forbids Trump from criticizing court employees has also added fuel to the fire, leading to the current escalation of the lawsuit. Recently, an appellate judge denied Trump's request to contest the restraining order, further complicating the proceedings. Concerns over the wider legal ramifications and procedural validity of the judge's decision to dissolve the Trump Organization arise from the ambiguity around his jurisdiction to do so. Within the framework of this high-profile case, legal professionals are keeping a careful eye on the latest developments, stressing the need for an exhaustive investigation of the relevant legal principles and processes. Navigating issues involving popular people and significant companies can be quite challenging, as seen in the complex legal dance that was the Trump Organization trial. With each passing day of court hearings, the case becomes a riveting focal point for heated discussions about judicial power, due process, and the fine line that separates the political and legal spheres. The current developments in these high-stakes legal battles have the potential to determine the course of this case and spark deep debates about the limits of judicial authority in cases of public interest. With the culmination of the Trump Organization trial drawing near, former President Donald Trump's legal troubles have reached new heights, exposing him and holding him accountable for his dishonest acts. Even though he is now legally guilty, questions remain about the trial's impact on the economy and whether or not Trump had malicious intent. The trial ended with a low-key unfolding of events, a quiet denouement that leaves us eager for more investigation. Legal expert Lisa Rubin says this is just the beginning. She imagines the attorneys painstakingly compiling all the material and testimony given during the trial as she excitedly awaits the January 5 deadline for the post-trial papers. Susanna Craig, a distinguished investigative journalist and longtime member of the New York Times dog team that has relentlessly followed Trump's business dealings, takes stock of the broader view. She reflects, shedding a dazzling light on prior cases of possible tax fraud schemes that were deftly used to inflate Trump's wealth. And I can't help but think about the original report that my colleagues and I revealed in 2018. In the field of real estate appraisals, Craig brought to light a pattern that occurs frequently, bringing to light a cunning plan that comprised raising the value of one's property and donating to charity in order to maximize one's tax deductions. Craig drew on the riveting criminal prosecution from the previous year to stress the recurring character of these acts, the obvious goal of which was to avoid paying taxes. She rightly points out that we are once again in the middle of a situation where property assessments are being reviewed in an effort to achieve more advantageous arrangements from banks. Craig's astute insight clarifies the Trump Organization's repetitious methods by framing this as part of an entrenched pattern of conduct. As many had hoped, the trial proved Trump liable, which would have far-reaching consequences for his financial future. Now we must determine how severe the financial consequences will be and prove that Trump's purported goals were the driving force behind these fraudulent actions. The trial's conclusion will have long-lasting effects on Trump's complex financial background. The upcoming post-trial briefs will summarize all of the material, potentially revealing the intricate financial dealings of the Trump Organization. Even as this court battle begins its next exciting chapter, Donald Trump is still dealing with the fallout from the trial, which could mark a watershed event in his life outside of the presidency. An all-encompassing savior of repeated budgetary manipulations and the impending financial ramifications will impact the public's view of Trump's entrepreneurial endeavors profoundly and permanently.